All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, excited for this one.
I think this one today is going to be a heavy one.
It is, it is.
We were talking about Chief Joseph of the
Yeah.
Nez Perce, and his legacy is one that I don't know if I fully grasped
It's complex.
until I started going through some of this research.
Yeah, and it's one of those figures in history where you think you know the story,
Right.
and then you realize there's so much more to uncover.
Absolutely. And the the way that I think it really hit home for me was listening to this podcast debate
Oh, yeah.
called The Legacy of Chief Joseph, Hero or Tragic Leader.
Mm.
And they really dig into whether his surrender during the Nez Perce War was this courageous act to save his people, or was it this tragic decision that cost them their homeland?
I see, I see. Yeah, it's a question that's been debated by historians and Native American communities for over a century.
Right. And honestly, listening to this podcast, it's left me kind of torn because there are very, very strong arguments on both sides.
I bet, I bet. So what were some of the key points that they were bringing up in the debate?
So they have these two hosts, Sarah and James, and they're going back and forth. And Sarah's really questioning, if Chief Joseph's surrender was truly a victory.
Okay.
Because, it resulted in the Nez Perce's exile from their land.
Right.
And could be seen as giving up on their homeland. And she makes this comparison to Sitting Bull, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Who resisted U.S. forces for years. And her point is that Sitting Bull, by continuing that fight, kept the injustices that Native Americans were facing
Yeah.
in the spotlight.
In the public eye.
Yeah.
Kept it relevant, kept it in the conversation.
Exactly. And she wonders if Chief Joseph's surrender, well, while it did save lives, in the short term, might have let those injustices kind of fade away.
So she's saying by surrendering, he may have inadvertently allowed the problem to be swept under the rug a bit.
Right. And a really thought-provoking argument.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, would greater awareness at the time have actually led to a better outcome for the Nez Perce in the long run?
Right, right. Absolutely.
But then you have James, who's arguing the other side.
Okay. What's his take?
And he really tries to put you in Chief Joseph's shoes. Right? He's like, imagine leading your people on this desperate 11,170-mile retreat being chased by the U.S. Army.
Wow.
You are outnumbered, outgunned. Your resources are dwindling.
I mean, what a desperate situation.
Right. And so he poses this question. He's like, could Chief Joseph, faced with total annihilation, choose anything other than the survival of his people?
Right.
Even if it meant losing their homeland.
Tough question. It makes you consider, what would you prioritize in that scenario? Survival or holding on to your land?
It really does.
It's a heartbreaker, isn't it? Because either way, there's a heavy cost.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this such a complex issue to grapple with.
For sure, for sure.
But to really understand, I think, all of this, we have to look at the historical context, too.
Absolutely. Context is everything in situations like this.
What was the situation on the ground during the Nez Perce War? Like, how did they get to this point?
Well, it's important to understand that this wasn't just some isolated incident. The Nez Perce War was the culmination of decades of broken treaties and just this relentless westward expansion of white settlement.
So they're being pushed off their lands.
Exactly. They were being forced off their lands, their way of life was being threatened, and really, they were fighting for their very existence.
That's a good point. And so Chief Joseph is making these decisions under unimaginable pressure.
Absolutely.
Are there any parallels to other leaders in history who face similar dilemmas?
Oh, tons. I mean, think about figures like Spartacus, leading a slave revolt against the Roman Empire, or Winston Churchill rallying Britain against Nazi Germany. These leaders all faced these seemingly impossible odds and had to balance the immediate survival of their people with these long-term goals of freedom and autonomy. And, the consequences of their choices continue to be debated even today, just like with Chief Joseph.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of similar themes there.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the universality of these types of struggles.
Yeah, that's a good point. So after the war, what were the long-term consequences for the Nez Perce? Did they get to go back home?
Well, that's the truly tragic part of the story. You see, despite Chief Joseph's hope that surrender would mean a peaceful return to their Oregon homeland, the Nez Perce were exiled to Oklahoma, which was just vastly different from their ancestral lands in the Pacific Northwest.
So their way of life was completely disrupted.
Exactly. And many of them, sadly, perished on that journey. And those who did survive faced just immense hardship and cultural displacement.
So surrendering didn't lead to a peaceful resolution.
No, it didn't. And it's a stark reminder of the lasting impact of these historical events and the difficult choices that leaders have to make. And, sometimes even when you make a choice that seems like the best option at the time,
Right.
it doesn't always lead to the outcome that you hoped for.
It's a reminder that history is rarely simple.
Right.
There's no easy answers.
It's messy.
Yeah, it's messy. And I think Chief Joseph's story is one that really forces us to wrestle with these difficult questions.
It does.
About leadership and sacrifice and the price of peace.
Absolutely. It challenges us to think about those choices that leaders have to make when faced with truly impossible situations.
Yeah, and there's no easy answers.
No, there are not.
And that's, I think, what makes this so compelling.
It is. It is.
So where does all this leave us? I mean, Chief Joseph's legacy, his story, it isn't just some historical footnote.
No, absolutely not.
Right. This is something that I think is still relevant today.
It definitely is.
So thinking about all of this and everything we've discussed, how do you think leaders should balance that responsibility of protecting their people with the pursuit of ideals like freedom and homeland?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer. But I think Chief Joseph's story gives us a powerful framework for thinking about these issues. It forces us to consider the complexities, the trade-offs, and the long-term consequences of our actions.
It's a story that stays with you long after you hear it.
It does.
And I think that's the power of history, right?
Absolutely, to learn from the past.
Yeah, and so knowing what we know about Chief Joseph's story, how do you think about that question? How do you think leaders should balance those competing priorities? That's something for all of us to think about as we continue to learn and explore this complex part of history.
It is. It is. And I encourage everyone listening, do your own research, come to your own conclusions. There's so much more to discover about Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce people.
And we'll provide some links down below in the show notes.
Absolutely.
To do just that.
Yeah, keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. All right. Until next time.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.